This is a production of Cornell University.
Welcome everybody to our 6th year, Carl?
Yeah.
Of Howling at the Moon, as we started out early on in the pandemic days. And, we do it for a very short period of time. And now it's starting to come together in clippings podcasts. So if those of you, I'll draw attention to this some other time. But for those of you that are interested in listening to some of the podcasts that we've taken from the show over the years, we've got an ace undergrad communication specialist, Jake Sikowski, who's turning our previous shows into little snippets or clippings of really informative stuff. So hopefully you'll pay attention to that. And I think Carl promoted it through the email just a couple of weeks ago. Okay, without any further ado, I think opening day should be a national holiday, Carl. What do you think? And of course, the Yanks and even the Red Sox are tied for first place. Hopefully, it's the last time that happens. I've got to put up with Red Sox fans. But, the grass is green, the ball's flying around. And now till October, it's every day. I just love it. Carl hates this. Okay, so let me get my cursor. And in light of that, Greg Chorvis and the guys at Saugerties already at it, getting those infields ready. Big differences between upstate and downstate. And we'll talk about the weather as we get going. But for sure, working these infields, this is why a lot of fields have become synthetic, because you got to have people who know what they're doing getting the clay ready this time of year. And this is why Greg's facility hosts so many games, so many tournaments, is the envy of communities far and wide, and something you just don't see as much anymore with this deep commitment to baseball in particular. And of course, it's a multi-use facility. But big shout out to Greg and the guys in Saugerties at Canteen Memorial that have been good supporters of the show over the years. And Carl, without any further ado, I know you're going to take a different tack today, but as I said earlier, you were a convivial, pleasant guy hanging out with Dave Hicks, winning your mid-amateur championship a number of years ago. And I know you've got something to say about people in general today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about golfers. We're going to talk so much about sort of evidence-based turf management, best management practices, what the science tells us. We're going to spend all these next 10 weeks talking about that. And I sort of put this, it's a little bit facetious, but does it even matter that we can produce good grass or bad grass sometimes? This is an example for those watching. If we fertilize in this case, it's perennial ryegrass in Wisconsin. If we fertilize it a little bit, we get less weeds. Great. We know how to do things really efficiently. Maybe you don't have to use herbicides as much, but the product or the grass sometimes does not equal what the person using the grass feels as their experience, right? And this is most known in golf courses. A person is going to play a golf course. It's not just how good the golf course is, it's the customer experience. And we looked at this a long time ago with our New York State Park golf courses. This was not an efficient way to do this research. I went through thousands of online reviews, Google reviews, Facebook, Yelp, Golf Advisor, and I would manually input how many stars the review gave it. And if there are comments, I would keep those comments, and then I would sort of categorize them, especially poor reviews. Okay, what were they saying about the golf course that they didn't like? And we could basically bucket them into 4 categories. It was either the course conditions. Yeah, no, you're good. And a pace of play, right? Golfers want to play really fast. If it's really slow, they don't like that. Amenities, things like, is there water to drink on the golf course? Are there bathrooms? And then customer service. And we did not expect what we found, which was that over 50% of the reviews, 51%, of poor reviews mentioned bad customer service as the reason they had a poor time. And I think this review just encapsulates it so well at one of the state park courses. When you check in, it's got a DMV feel without attitudes to match. Oh, that's not great. You'll then go to a starter who's as friendly as shingles. Okay, we're 0 for 2. After the TSA procedure to begin your round, you'll have a rectal exam. Once you're on the course, it's great. You'll soon forget about it all. And this was a poor review that says, hey, the grass was really good. The product was really good. And I gave it 2 out of 5 stars because I spent 5 hours there, but my 5 minutes interacting with people somehow screwed that up. And that's really frustrating. I think for the superintendents listening, probably is a relatable experience.
And this isn't just state parks. This is
No.
pretty much true. Like whenever we say this to people, or I make this comment, Carl, in a meeting, everybody's head starts nodding, and they say, "Here's what they said to us last week." People in the front of the house don't start out like this. Golfers do this to them. This is what they said. Remember? All right, but it's not just golfers.
It turns out this is not just golf. And I'm going to highlight Maggie Ryder's blog post here. Maggie's doing some really cool blog posts, not just lawn and landscape, but also some sports turf stuff. I'm sure she'll do golf stuff. She did she built a code that did this all for her. So she scraped all these reviews from a Austin, Texas landscaping company, one company. She did sentiment analysis. So the code looks through all the words in the comments and sort of groups them into these categories. In the positive reviews for this company, 66% of the time, the most often cited topic for a good review was professionalism. The technicians were polite, professional, and friendly. That was the number one often cited thing in a review. When you go to the negative reviews, that's when you start to see the poor results showed up. So 64% said, the reason I'm giving it a poor review is because I didn't get results. But if you look at all the other things on this list, Frank, 39% of the time, missing appointments. That was why they didn't have a good experience. Billing, 23% of the time, sales, price. So this is also saying like, hey, sometimes good reviews can be driven by customer service. And that's the interesting thing here is you might not provide the best product, but if you're nice, thank you, you're welcome, hey, anything you need, that can make your customers really happy and probably get return business. And I think it comes back to this, Frank. I know you've said in the past, you're not, you'd rather not be around people. You'd rather just look at the grass. We don't need golfers. Can I just grow the grass? It comes back to it's a people business. And sometimes how we treat people is just as important, if not more important, than the product we produce, the grass we produce.
And I'd say this, Carl, we often say this on the golf course. It's like, a lot of people know how to grow grass.
Yep.
Right. But, staying at a golf course, being a golf course superintendent for 30 years is more about growing grass. There's an assumption that you know how to grow grass. There's no magic to growing grass. This is what's been interesting. The changing climate, the increasing pressures on the turf, the lack of investment in infrastructure up until recently, I think made it harder just to meet that bare minimum of having decent grass. And I think your data shows that. Listen, you got weeds all over. They're going to be pissed about that.
Yeah.
Right? You got dead greens. They're going to be pissed about that. But if you meet this minimum sort of bar, right, and you've talked about that, what's an average lawn got to look like? Mm-hmm. And what do we do because we get paid to do it, especially in the lawn care business where you're only really getting paid when you apply something or mow something. And you're not really paid for sort of producing that landscape as a whole. But I'm going to continue in the vein, Carl, of grass being a people business, but deflect it a little bit. These are these old guys, Piper and Oakley. They wrote this book, Turf for Golf Courses, in the 1920s. And the first line on the first page of the book, first book ever written about golf courses, is this: good grass is conditioned by two great factors, climate and soil. The latter can be modified, the former must be accepted. So let's start with what we've had to accept. We had a proper winter, as my British friends would say. A proper winter with good cold temperatures, adequate but still not excessive snowfall. I mean, even snowfall along the lakes, they got dumped on. I think it snowed every day on the Tug Hill Plateau. Those poor people got like 12, 13 feet of snow, and there's barely a hill to ski down it. It's just flat farmland on the plateau that just gets buried in snow. And then you had the cold temperatures and then freezing and then thawing and raining and freezing again. And then you see ground heaving everywhere. So I would just say last year, we had a proper summer and a proper winter. Now, coming out of the proper winter, we got dead annual bluegrass in some places. Not everybody, but some places are definitely showing. Now, this is good. If you're trying to kill it like we're trying to do it on our sports field, and you made a couple of applications of ProGrass last year on your ryegrass, even with a little bit of bluegrass in there, we smoked. Chris was able to smoke the annual bluegrass on our game field out there. And you go out, it's like, wow, is that snow mold? No, it's dead annual bluegrass. Okay, back to the weather. You can see in this monthly departures from normal in Ithaca, right? It was warmer than normal. Look at January, February, March, April. You're looking at, 2 to almost 8 degrees above normal month after month. Last winter, right? Last winter, 2024. Then you see as we got through the summer, June and July was warmer than normal, a little bit cooler in August, warmer in the fall. This is the story, right? Warm fall. And then as you can see at the end of the top chart and the beginning of the bottom chart where you're cooler than normal now. We've been on the cold side, a little bit of a roller coaster, but certainly warm in the fall. And the other thing about the fall that persisted was the incredibly dry weather, right? Annual departure from normal, you're looking at 2 inches below normal, October, November, and December. This was the story. And it has persisted. We're in the, some people in the 50 to 75% of normal, more in the 75 to 100. So we're starting out the season on the dry side. Last fall, it was so dry, sparks were setting off landscapes. Prospect Park had a fire that's going to cost $250,000 or more to replace just the natural landscape from, homeless people in an area barbecuing, spark goes into the woods, boom, 10 acres burned up. So it's a pretty big deal. Now, from as far as what got smoked from last year, I'd say towards the end of the year, the crabgrass came on and really took over. We had a dry season. Lawns really started to suffer. Many of them are not going to recover well. But if you see crabgrass skeletons out there, my opinion right now, just go in there, scuff it up, and throw seed. Don't go for the pre-emergent yet. Get some grass growing there, right? Now, as we've learned in a recent paper, and we're going to talk about this as we get going, grass alone there doesn't stop the crabgrass from coming, but it does slow the emergence. Okay, just a note about if you're heading out to spray your pre-emergent or you want to go out and do anything, we've got the runoff risk tool. And again, for the Ithaca area, we're low, but we're starting to build up as the rains are going to start coming through next week. And you can see by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, when are we getting to the 31st? Monday, Tuesday of next week, you're going to start to have great runoff potentials in certain areas where the rains are coming through. So check the runoff miles. It's a very important time of the year. And I hate to say, I see a lot of farmers running around spreading manure at this time of year, and it's just not a good thing. Okay, late grub damage still obvious this spring. In fact, Kyle Wickings has got my head spinning a little bit that if they're feeding late, maybe it's crane fly. But this is some damage I saw in October in Central Park with some grubs there and trying to look at the anal slit and seeing what it is. Not everybody's favorite job. But we were able to see that it was, I think it was Oriental beetle at this location. But, the grubs themselves, the turf's looking fine. The grubs are everywhere. The only problem with this area is the vertebrate damage, and that remains the problem. It isn't necessarily the grub pressure as much as it's that. All right, let's talk about getting the season going here. Soils are barely in the 50s. They're still frozen. Walt Nelson's probably can't get out his front door. There's still snow up north. We had just a dusting yesterday of snow when we were having the conversation. So barely creeping into the 50s all the way down into Delmarva. So we're a slow start to the year for sure here in March, right? And this past week was cooler along the coast, warmer by the lakes, a little warmer inland, a little cooler by the coast. And of course, Carl, I don't have to remind everybody, but the growth model is there. And the grass isn't growing very much. We're just, Chris has got people playing on the soccer fields. We got golfers playing on the golf course. But it's important to keep in mind the grass isn't growing. And I got a question for you at the end, pal, about how to reconcile this. Okay, so what about moisture? Well, in the last week, we got a good dump along the coast. On the left here, you can see we got a pretty good dump along the coast, but pretty dry inland. Right? The rest of us have been a bit on the dry side, but definitely wet along the coast last week. And it looks like it's going to be a little bit of the opposite. It's going to get dry along the coast. We're going to start to see some drying out. But to the north, we're going to start to see some rainfall. We are into seed head suppression right now. Of course, if you're really serious in the golf business about suppressing seed heads, you're making that proxy application with your snow mold application in the fall. And so that's become pretty much the standard since Sean Askew started doing that work a number of years ago. And that follow-up application is due in a lot of places, which seems hard to believe. But certainly the models have been pretty consistent about this. But you want to keep in mind, you're spraying a growth regulator at a time where you want the grass to get going. So you've got to reconcile that sort of dissonance in your head that, oh, well, I want it to grow, but I'm spraying a growth regulator. Okay, Carl, I got a question for you. I'm going to set you up here. We got about 15 minutes to have this chat because I know you're a golfer and I see this bubble up every once in a while, and I want to see what you think about this. I'm going to make a pitch, and then I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. It's green and open early. This is a golf course superintendent in Morristown, New Jersey, posted on TurfNet. Uses covers, gets the greens going. Here's my question. Green and open early, good deal, bad deal? All right, here's the impact covers have, right? You can see here, where you put covers on, you warm that system, right? This is what we're talking about. You get that warmth going, you get soils activated. Once you heat the soil mass, right, it's on. Plants are growing. Up until then, you're staring at it. You can see on the left, the aerification holes are filled in. On the right, you can still see them very clearly, especially if you're doing late aerification. I'll just make a note that heavy blankets of sand worked very well this year. I saw it on our golf course and a number of other golf courses this year. Heavy blankets of sand worked really well for getting things going and then capitalizing on maybe using some coarser particles, maybe even aerifying a little bit, getting them into the profile. All right, Carl, plays up. It's a good time to be in golf. We're record round numbers. As we look at annual rounds, we've gone, talk about a roller coaster. We're having a ball right now. All right. The sun is shining and everybody's happy. Everybody's spending money on golf courses. We see a lot of infrastructure projects. I sit in a room of superintendents that I'm speaking to. I say, how many people got projects, bunkers, irrigation? 80% of the hands are up. So golf is, people are playing. Somebody's got money. They're spending it back in deferred maintenance. This is a very good thing. And a lot of this has to do with remote work, Carl. This is what the remote worker looks like nowadays, right? I talked about this with our state park guys. The National Golf Foundation has found a 25% increase in weekday play since the pandemic. We knew this. Now we got data. There was a workday study that was done recently that I stumbled onto, work from home study about it was a really long presentation, maybe 80, 90 slides. In the middle of it is this golf effect. The fact that you look at cell phone data in a community, right, where there's golf courses, right? Cell phone data tracking where people are, right? In 2019 on Mondays, 12,000 people were heading or at golf courses. In 2022, 24,000 people. Look at the increase in play on Monday through Thursday through Friday, and you don't see it as much on Saturday. They're still playing on Saturday. They're still at the golf, but now they're at the golf course all week, not just on Saturday and Sunday. In fact, the data also shows they're taking the early tee times. So now you used to have a little bit more time in the morning, except for the dew sweepers. You're never going to get ahead of those guys, right? So you let them go, and then the rest of the people are coming. Now you got a whole pile of people coming early. They want to fit it in before they start working remotely. They're not working on Mondays in the office, and they're not working on Fridays in the office anymore, Carl. They're only there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So now Monday maintenance days might have to be Tuesday maintenance days. And how does that make it look come Friday, Saturday, Sunday for your weekends? You don't have 4 days to recover from a verticut in sand. You got 3 days to recover. All right, Carl, here's the question, brother. Here's what I hear. We should open and play whenever we can to maximize. If you got a private club, Craig Currier never closes Glen Oaks. The flags are always in. If the grass, if you can see the grass, you're playing out there. Access. Then, if you're in the business of golf, like our Elm Tree brother, you want rounds and revenue. Okay, so get out there. And then there's these other people that say, oh, no, we got to stay closed as long as we can to preserve the golf course for the season. Opening now will hurt us later in the season. You could have this same argument for Ben Palmer could have this same argument on play. Oh, why can't I use this field? You're going to do damage. Okay, Carl, where are you? What do you think?
Well,
I did it to you, didn't I? I did
yeah,
it.
you've put both sides there, and I am split too. As a golfer, one of my favorite things to do is in March, and I keep track of every year my first round. It's always second, third week in March. I go up to Elm Tree, and it's just one of the best experiences of the year. Is I get out for the first time, I get to see the ball fly in 2025. It's sort of like, it creates this inertia momentum for the rest of the year. Oh man, I want to golf. Like that was so cool. It's 50 degrees out. It was sunny. I'm loving this. And from an operator perspective, it's the most money you can make with no cost. You don't have to mow. I don't. I can put temporary tees out there. That's a really good option, I think. Don't beat up your tee surfaces. If you got artificial mats for par threes, I think that's a really good idea. But you're making basically free money. You just need one person in the pro shop, take the cash, and go out and play. I don't have to do anything else. People will come and play. There will be 100 rounds in Central New York
Okay.
on March 15th.
Okay. All right. Now,
And then if I'm a superintendent, I'm saying exactly what you put in that slide there, Frank. There is no growth happening right now. And when I have traffic plus no growth, I'm going to have less turf cover as we get close to the season that actually matters, in April and throughout the growing season. And I do worry about, okay, do we get some weed encroachment there? If we're trying to keep POA out and we've got ball marks early in the season on greens that aren't growing, man, are we going to get some POA infestations there? Um, I think generally, I probably worry most about tee surfaces where there's divoting and you are definitely not growing that grass back for another month, probably. That's where I'd say, hey, like if you're gonna open and you're gonna try and make some money, like mats, or just put the tees off in the rough. A lot of us golfers do not care, especially public golf. I'm paying $20 to play 18 holes in March. You can put me off in the rough. I can tee it up in the rough. I don't care. I'll take divots in the rough. I'm just happy to be outside. Like try and keep them off the high value tee surfaces and preserve that. That's what I'd say if I'm or at least I'm a superintendent, I'm trying to argue for hey, make less work for me later on in the season. That's maybe one option I'd go with. The other thing I'd say, Frank, is when we look at we get data from Pellucid that looks at capacity, weather adjusted capacity for golf.
mm-hmm.
How many rounds can you play in March, April, May, June, July based on the weather? Is it sunny out? Is it warm out? Is it not raining?
Right.
Where we see the most variation, especially in upstate New York, is March, April, November, December. And you can get huge increases in your potential play by 2,000 rounds sometimes in March and April if you get a nice March and April. And that means you can really get ahead on your revenue if you're an operator. And if we look 10, 20 years in the future with climate change, we're going to extend those shoulders of the season. Man, it's going to be hard to not open, especially public golf in those times, because that's where you can make a lot of your money and you can get into the green as opposed to the red.
Right. Okay. So let me throw a wrench in this. And maybe you listen to the podcast I did with Stuart and Jim, where Stuart says that golfers are more like bears than squirrels, right? They hibernate in the winter and come out in the spring and want to play golf like crazy. And they had beautiful weather in the fall and probably nobody was playing the way we normally expect them to. Why don't you play golf in the fall, Carl?
That's a great analogy. You're sort of tire yourself out in the fall. And I think there's also this effect of Masters starts in April for a lot of people. That's like the first time they'll watch golf on TV. You really get the itch to play then. Once you're in September, October, November, you've played, if you're a competitive golfer, you've played all your tournaments, you've been with your buddies, you probably had enough of them after 20 or 30 rounds, to be honest, at the end of the year.
Right.
I'm gonna hang up the clubs, take some time off. So that's a good point too by Stuart, is maybe the springtime is where you can really make hay and get that momentum for the
Okay,
year.
so then let's talk about this in other arenas, right? The lawn thing, let's leave it to the side because let's just assume you're looking at that. But sports fields are a different animal. And right? So let's think that same argument that happens here. And then all of a sudden you see the clear justification in our climate for synthetic turf. So when we get ourselves into these pickles, how do you reconcile these issues where now we're seeing a growing concern. And this is something we're going to talk about ad nauseum this year because it is front of mind for all of us. And it is, presenting us big challenges with the, I think some people would say epidemic of synthetic turf being laid down, much like ag land going to solar farms. It feels like a waste. It feels like, well, in the case of synthetic turf, maybe polluting. But at the same time, Carl, we want the kids out and about and playing on safe surfaces. How do you reconcile sports fields in your mind with the pickle we're in now? Because again, just like with golf, you could argue both sides of these things effectively, and that's of course the world we live in nowadays. Where do you fall on how you feel about natural grass synthetic at this time of year?
I I think there's a big difference spring versus fall sport. And we saw this. We have our data for like a 10-year average of, I think, in New York, the growth potential. How much do we expect the grass to grow based on an average timber 67? 67 is about where we want to be. In the spring, you don't get to 50% growth potential until middle of May on average, which is the end of our Division One spring season. So we're playing from February through May when we're getting basically no growth.
That's correct.
And I worry about those sports on natural grass because we're getting no growth. We're gonna be using the fields at least 5 times a year. We can expect that field quality to decline and the fluctuations in soil moisture, compaction. I worry a lot more about the safety of that field in the spring versus the fall. Like we have our soccer teams both play on natural grass, both on campus and their practice facilities. Growth potential stays high now in the fall, basically almost until December. I mean, we've hosted NCAA division games when it snows in December, but up until then, the grass is still growing. So we can support the traffic, and we have data on the firmness readings, traction, how long the ball rolls, and how much it bounces, and it maintains these standards up until the end of the season because we have enough of warmth and growth to recover.
So we're talking to, you and I are in this project now where we're working with school districts on trying to figure out how to do synthetic and natural turf, governance and stewardship and making decisions and how they go about it. We met with Tom Ferrara, the facility director of facilities for the city of Syracuse School District, an absolutely incredible operation. And he's quite a professional, that guy. But, he's in a city. I said to him, listen, I think you need 3 fields for every one. You need 3 natural grass fields, 6, 7 acres of grass for every synthetic field you have, just off the top of my head, where you're going to trash them and you're going to need recovery. I'd almost say, if you have 3 teams in one field, you probably need 5, one synthetic field, you probably need 5 fields, 3 fields, 5 fields in the spring, 3 fields in the summer with 2 resting. So, the end of the day, you're going to need more land. And he was like, yeah, I don't have any more land. And I'm spending millions on stormwater associated with the synthetic turf. So for those of you in the sports turf business, this used to be something that was relatively straightforward, I would say. I mean, and natural grass was losing. I think synthetic turf is now coming under question, but you start to see the constraints that made synthetic turf the best option, right, Carl?
Urban areas, Frank, and we've seen it in New York City. They want to get rid of synthetic turf in the city and replace it with natural grass. We love that, but when you have millions of people and probably hundreds of thousands of people who want to play sports in a confined area, that's just not going to probably happen with
No,
one
and
natural
I'll, and since we it's baseball and we're going to be, the Yanks are off today. I don't know how the hell they take a Friday off and then they play it Saturday. But nevertheless, I got to go one day without baseball. I was very happy to see Juan Soto strike out and lose the game last night for the Mets. So I was very happy about that. But in the baseball world, Carl, it's the same thing. We showed Greg knows what he's doing, taking care of that dirt. But how many school districts have anybody that has never mind, even if they have the expertise, have the time to tend to it? And that's another reason where you see synthetic turf having its benefits and options in those. Matter of fact, I think I've said it on this program. If you gave me one synthetic field I could have, I'd put a baseball field in, because most of these guys don't have the ability like Greg does, or the expertise, capacity to do the infield the way it can be. And man, that's a danger. right? There's this safety thing from a broader environmental perspective. And then there's the safety from a projectile being hit at you at the exit velo. Now that we pay attention to that stupid statistic, somebody said yesterday, it's not how fast, it's how many. It's not how fast it goes, it's how many go. It's so stupid. Some of this analytic stuff is over the top. We got any questions before we wrap it up?
I just want to point out, Greg is on with us today, and he said he
good.
limits play in the spring. So no cleats, sneakers only. We've heard
Same with Ben, right?
Said the same thing again, and that's a great example of someone who knows what they're doing. Hey, if you want to get out here, we have to limit the damage we're doing to the turf. So he says he does that.
Yeah.
And he's still got steel clothes too.
Or you sacrifice. You just say, here, go use this. You can use it until it's not safe, and then you got to go use that one. All right, Carl, we're at the end, brother. 30 minutes gone by.
The first episode always goes quickly. Next week we'll have Art DeGaetano on, the real weather guy, good climate.
The real weather guy, right?
He's good climate. Learned.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about sort of the fall and some of the trends we're seeing with how the snow fell and growing degree days, and also soil temperature and model stuff, right? Carl's you're building a lot of models, brother, and Art and Ben are certainly the brains for you and me. More me than you. You got the brains, but nevertheless, we'll see everybody next week.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.